In that interaction, Jesus actually says, John the Baptist is the greatest of all men born of women, which is basically everybody, right? And yet, in that very same setting, John the Baptist is doubting that Jesus is who he says he is because he's experiencing pain and suffering.
On that point of you seeing, horrific things happening in the world and then having doubts, I think for me, that was one of the persuasive arguments of the new atheist movement that I became a part of when I was 18 years old, which was, I think Richard Dawkins had said about, if God is all loving, then why would he let a 2-year-old kid in Africa have their eyeball eaten out from the inside by a parasite?
Yeah.
If I could intervene with that, because, the assertion is that God is omnipotent, all-powerful, and omniscient, all-present.
Yeah.
If I could intervene with that as a human, I would stop that. And so if God is omnipotent, all-powerful and omnipresent, knows everything and is everywhere, then why wouldn't he intervene with the baby having its eyeball eaten out from the inside?
Yeah. It's a good point. And I think if there is an objection that is truly impactful on Christianity in the atheist corner, it is the problem of evil, and always has been, because it's far more of an emotional and existential question than it is an intellectual question. Now, part of the problem with it is that if we're talking about evil with a capital E, we're implying that there's a good with a capital G. And so I think we do run into an issue when saying that evil exists, we're implying that good exists. And if we're implying that good exists, we're implying that there's a moral law to adhere to call the good good and the evil evil. And if there's a moral law, then there has to be a moral lawgiver. And that's where we come into issues with, is this subjective or is this objective?
I think the atheist movement would argue that that moral good is virtue of what helps me to survive. So watching a small child suffer in such a way, if I didn't feel anything bad about that, then I wouldn't have the wiring for survival, because I wouldn't have the proclivity to defend a suffering child. If I don't have that, then I probably don't reproduce and I don't pass on my genes, and then I'm selected out of existence. So that pain I feel when I see a child suffering is a function of my evolutionary mechanics that make me more likely to survive. And anyone that didn't have that wouldn't have survived and wouldn't be here now.
Sure.
So evolution, therefore, is the answer.
I think that might suffice in certain instances. However, it's still sort of smuggling in moral categories into a biological explanation. So part of, you read Richard Dawkins, you read River Out of Eden, and he has that section where he talks about, we shouldn't expect to see any rhyme or reason, good or bad. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. And there's an aspect of Dawkins himself in that volume, at least at that time when he wrote it, articulating that at the end of it all, there is no such thing as actually, you can't call that parasite in that boy's eye evil. You can say, I don't like it. But to import this moral category of evil is actually to import an idea. And this is actually what Dawkins was criticized by individuals like John Gray, the philosopher who taught at the London School of Economics. And he says, you're a really great biologist, but then you want to impart actual intrinsic value to people. And if you're looking at a simple, selfish DNA perspective, you can't actually ascribe that, because your DNA, your selfish DNA, exists to carry on its selfish DNA. And so in one sense, that child has no bearing on you. Now, it might have a protective mechanism where you want to figure out why the child got the parasite, and so you try to avoid that in order to not get the parasite yourself. But science can't actually give you an explanation for what the moral implications are in that instance. Let me give you an example.
I think I understand the point there.
So I thought your argument was very interesting, especially as someone who has taken a logic course, has studied logic before. Your logical reasoning was interesting to me, and I'm not sure I exactly follow it.
Okay.
Your 2 points especially, and your 3 little points there you had for the credibility of the Bible.
The New Testament? Yeah. You want me to put them up there again?
Sure.
I can do that.
Yeah, for sure. I thought those are especially interesting because I'm not exactly sure, out of all the arguments for God, why you would choose those ones. But let me ask you one about, especially about the eyewitness, is very interesting to me. Do you believe that L. Ron Hubbard is a real person?
Well, he was a real person. You're talking about the guy that wrote Dianetics and is the father of Scientology?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Is Scientology real?
Well, I don't believe the beliefs of Scientology are real, but there are Scientologists, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I thought that was an interesting point then when you were talking about the historical evidence for people like Herod, for people like Pilate in the Bible. I agree. Those are real people. However, I do not think that your argument that you're making regarding them existing in the Bible and them also being real people actually argues for the credibility of the Bible itself. I'm not sure it argues for the existence of God itself or, the credibility of Christianity, just using that.
Well, you're right. That's because I don't just use that in the book. I glossed over the arguments for the existence of God to get to this since it's Easter week.
Sure.
And I can't cover it all. But if we had more time, I could talk about the fine-tuning of the universe and the necessary for intelligence to create the first life and new life forms, and the moral argument for God, and the argument from laws of logic and consciousness and laws of mathematics, those transcendental arguments, if we had more time to get into the arguments for God.
Yes, sir. I'm actually familiar with all of those.
Okay.
And still, I'm an atheist, actually, even being familiar with all of those. But my real question for you right now is, specifically on these eyewitnesses for the resurrection. You argue a lot for the resurrection. Now, a lot of the New Testament, the earliest times the Gospels were ever written down and published were in the 70s AD. People who were writing them, like Paul, never met Jesus. I don't think a lot of people know that, but he did not ever meet Jesus.
Okay, well, why do you think, first of all, why do you think the New Testament documents were written in the 70s and 80s?
That is archaeological facts that they have corroborated multiple different accounts and multiple different scholars.
What are the archaeological facts that say the New Testament documents were written in the 70s and the 80s?
Those are dated. They're dated around the time literarily, linguistically. You can look it up. I was just reading before I came here, the scholar Bart Ehrman. He had a really great post about that. I encourage you to look at it. I encourage everyone to look at it because a lot of those new Gospels, that's the earliest they were written, was 70s AD. Latest was even up until the 120s AD is when they presented.
Yeah, well, I don't think Bart Ehrman's correct about that. And even if he is correct about it, the source material from the documents themselves predate when they were written. For example, even Bart Ehrman would admit that the creed in 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 to 8, I referred to it very briefly today, that talked about that Paul received what was told to him about who Jesus appeared to. It includes all the people Jesus appeared to with the exception of the women, and then the 500 others. That particular creed goes all the way back to within a year or two of the alleged resurrection itself. So the data is very old. Paul wrote 1 Corinthians in 55 AD. Even Bart Ehrman would agree with that.
Do you have a source for that?
Bart Ehrman.
I'll go look it up afterwards for sure. And I'll check on it because that's not what I found personally. But I'm actually interested too in that case about those eyewitness accounts. Have you ever had a friend who's told you, a funny story and they're saying, yeah, I swear this happened. I swear I saw it. But, you're not sure. You weren't there. You don't know. Sometimes people embellish a little bit. So I'm not seeing the necessary connection between me believing these eyewitness accounts. Sure, I suppose that there were definitely people, even if these New Testament authors weren't actually seeing the resurrection themselves, which they weren't, even if they were talking to people who were, I'm not sure I actually would believe that, or if I'd have any reason to believe them. So my question is to you, what is these actual eyewitnesses, what is their credibility? Like, why should I be compelled to believe them on only their word?
Well, because they suffered greatly for saying what they saw, and they were not predisposed to these beliefs. They held beliefs that were opposite this. They didn't think a man could claim to be God. That was blasphemy. In fact, that's what got Jesus killed. They didn't think one guy would rise from the dead in the middle of time. They thought everyone would rise from the dead at the end of time because that's what Daniel and Isaiah say. So they were not predisposed to believe this. They thought they were God's chosen people. Why would they invent a resurrection story that would get them kicked out of the synagogue and then beaten, tortured, and killed?
I think that same argument, though, could be used for many other religions. I mean, the same thing. If every other major religion...
Such as what?
Sure, such as all of the people who have ever died for Islam, who have ever died for pagan religions, etc., things like that. I mean, I don't think it's a great argument to say just because someone said, yes, this can get me great bodily harm, but yeah, I'm still going to die for it because I believe in it. I don't think I do not see the causal connection between them doing that and the argument at hand being true.
Why would they die for something they knew was false?
I don't think, sometimes it's the same thing. It's like we were just talking about truth. I think sometimes I believe that they think what they saw was true.
Okay, why would they think Jesus rose from the dead if he didn't? Why would they think that?
Limited scientific knowledge back then, limited secondhand accounts. You hear from a friend of a friend of a friend.
No. The people that saw it, why would Peter be martyred? Why would Paul be martyred? Why would James be martyred?
For any other reason, I don't see the difference between that and any other religion, any other person who's ever been martyred for anything.
Well, because these people witnessed an empirical event, a resurrection. There's nothing in Islam that says that is equivalent to what Christianity says. Christianity is basing their belief on an empirical event, that a man died after predicting he'd rise from the dead, and then he really did rise from the dead.
Yeah, and I think you could say that
So what's your explanation then? Hallucinations? Wrong tomb? What is it?
I wasn't there, but that's a great thing. That's why I think I don't have to believe in it, because I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what happened. But that's why I don't feel unnecessary, feel like I'm compelled to believe in that.
No one's compelled. You have free will. You go in the direction you want. But let me ask you this, Delaney. If Christianity really was true, would you become a Christian?
I don't think it's true, and I don't think it will
if it was.
I don't think it's a good question, honestly. I don't think it is true.
So the answer is no. Okay. If I gave you a book, would you read it?
Sure, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't think it's not fiction. I think there's a lot of things.
Let me just ask you one more question, Delaney.
Sure.
I appreciate you bringing this up, but why would you not possibly want, if there is a God, him to offer you paradise by taking anything you've done wrong upon himself? Why would you not want a being like that to offer you forgiveness and paradise?
I think that's a very interesting question, because I've always been of the opinion that I don't want there to be an afterlife. I find no comfort in it. I find more comfort in there being empty, black nothingness, genuinely. And I'm not saying this to be contrarian or to be, provocative. Genuinely, I think that is more comforting than living in this eternal limbo or whatever. People describe it as perfect happiness. I'm not sure, first of all, I don't see evidence for that. Second of all, I'm not sure I want that. Furthermore, I'm not sure that I would want to be there when I know people are, according to your religion, suffering somewhere else. If I know that, one of my friends who sinned for whatever reason is burning in hell forever, and I'm just hanging out in heaven, I don't think that would be perfect happiness. I don't think I really want that. So I really do not honestly see what is compelling people to want there to be an afterlife, to want there to be.
So if your friend, as you put it, is literally burning in hell, what would your friend want you to choose?
I don't know if they could think right now, because they'd probably be burning, as y'all say.
No,
but
if they are conscious and they know you're still here, what choice would they want you to make?
Well, they'd probably want me to, be in heaven. But guess what? That's what I wouldn't feel comfortable knowing that my friend is still burning there.
Okay, what you've just done is you've said exactly what C.S. Lewis said.
And what was that?
C.S. Lewis said that there's only two kinds of people in the end. Those who say to God, thy will be done, and those to whom God says, thy will be done. If you don't want Jesus now, you're not going to want him in eternity. You will be separated from him, and that's what hell is.
So you think I'm going to hell?
Sure. If Christianity's true, you just said you don't want to go to heaven. What else is there? There's only two possible options. You're either going to be with Jesus in the afterlife, or you're not. What other option is there?
Well, I think there's the option that you're wrong, personally.
Well, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
You're right.
I think so, yeah. It's okay.
But you talked about looking at evidence.
Mm-hmm.
how can there even be evidence in a world that there is no God, there is no organizer, there is no mind behind all this? Evidence, we wouldn't even exist. Nothing would exist. Reason wouldn't exist unless there's a mind that has given us the laws of reason and minds to know evidence.
Respectfully, I think we've jumped a few steps ahead in the argument there.
No, we jumped way back. Before we even get to the New Testament, we've got to establish why can we even know what evidence is, and why is this an orderly universe to even know what is true and what isn't.
Absolutely. I think it's due to science. It's due to the wonderful, physics, how the universe came to be. Yes, I do think it started. No, I do not think it was God. No,
What was it?
I think it was physics.
But physics had a beginning.
No, there are indeed physical theories nowadays that propose how the universe started without a God. And my question for you actually would be, where did God come from? How did God start?
Well,
If
by
everything is
definition, there has to be a first cause. Either the universe is the uncaused first cause, or something outside the universe is the uncaused first cause. And all the evidence shows that the universe had a beginning. If the universe had a beginning, there must be something outside the universe that is spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, and intelligent to cause the universe to have a beginning. You can't go on an infinite regress of causes. I hope you agree with that.
No, I agree, but I think you've actually just assumed, though, that you've just assumed right there that there is something outside of it, that there has to be, you've assumed in your argument that there has to be something outside, immaterial.
Yes,
I don't believe that.
If the material world had a beginning, there's got to be something immaterial that brought it into existence, correct?
No, I think we just have the material world, and that's it.
Well, the evidence doesn't show that.
I think actually the evidence
No, it doesn't.
does.
Sorry. Just thank
All
you,
right.
Delaney.
I
Appreciate
appreciate
it.
that. Thank you.
All right. God bless you. Thank you.
Driving home, my friends in my father's station wagon on Gallows Road in Virginia, and we went over a hill and went airborne. I was 2-lane road, kind of turned, and there was a tree there, heading toward it, and the car literally moved and got in the lane. I didn't hit anybody coming on the second lane. I had no control over the car. And when I got to the bottom of the hill, all my buddies were saying, "Come on, let's do it again." I said, "No." I was so drunk, I didn't want to do that, but I could never. But the Lord showed me; He spared my life. He had an angel, though I didn't see an angel, just moved the car, kept me alive. And he showed me, I spared you so many times. I showed you through nature. You like to hike. You went fishing. You took your machete. You chopped your way into the upper Potomac River or Shenandoah, chop a place down and fish all night by yourself with your dog. And you look up at the stars and see the sky, and you deny me. I knocked on your door all the time. That's what it was. That was like what was coming to me in a nutshell. And so when I got closer to the light, I saw the light coming from a rock suspended in space. Looked like a city on the other side. Then that cleared off, and I saw it looked like a burning pile of coals off in the distance. And then I came floating, and I noticed the light was coming from a person on that rock. And as I came near him, he stood up. It was like a rock suspended in space, and there was like a rock ledge with a little seat on it. And he got up off of it, and he walked down some stairs, and I landed feet first in front of him, and I fell face down hard as you can imagine, and I didn't get hurt. And then someone or something picked me up very gently, not gently, but with force. But I feel like I didn't know who was touching me. Just someone touched me and just forcefully set me down, and so I instantly knew I was standing before Jesus. He had a hood over his face, and I looked at his wrist. He had holes in his wrist. I could see blood caked on his beard. And I made the realization that if I was alive back then, I would have crucified Christ. That's how much I hated God. To realize what the Lord was showing me, He says, I showed you great love. What did you do with my love? What did you do with the gift I gave you? I mocked you. I scorned you. Oh, how I treated other people. I betrayed people. I lied about them. I sold them for 30 pieces of silver. I denied them. I abandoned them. I got in fights. I beat up people, literally. Beat up people with my word. I slandered. I always went like, Jesus before Herod, If you're really God, you would not let all the babies die. If you're really God, you would do it my way. if I was really God, and all those answers were hitting you right in the face, and you go, you ain't in. This is a part where I think that the gospel message really lacks, is that they have talking points, which are fine. It has its fruit, but no one explains what the iniquity in our heart is, how we are responsible, and what we do to each other has repercussions beyond anything. You're drunk, your alcoholism, whatever, you're destroying yourself, destroying other people. And there's an accounting for that. And he came to spare us of that. That was made so plain to me. God's love judged me for mocking his love and making demands that you must do it my way, or I'm not going to have anything to do with you, God. That was my attitude. Maybe that's many people's attitudes now. A door opened up like a scroll, and I went through it, and I was in a tunnel heading toward another light. So I asked the Lord for years, why did I ever come back? It weighs heavily on you. Why? This is 1980. I never knew that I would be addressing all these positive near-death experiences, because that's mine goes counter that, because I was gone through the veil. I saw through the deception. And I'll explain that in a second. So I went through this tunnel-like vortex. It was like the inside of a tornado, and sight, sound, cussing, slurping, foul language, screams and shrieks, and heat that could hit you in the face, like melt your eyeballs out, or your tongue cleaves to the roof of your mouth. Is that hot? Hotter than Tucson. And stood up, I looked out, and all of a sudden these people come running out of the house and welcomed me. They came down, and more people came up. And they said, "Welcome to paradise. Don't you feel the love here, Brian?" And they were slapping me on my back and it was a sickly, sweet type of love where somebody wants to be your best friend, but they have a dagger behind your back. There, before I was sent there, this is what Jesus said just before I was sent to this place. He said, when you arrive at this place and you feel a sense of overwhelming, say my name and my title. Okay. And he went on and he said something else. The option for your return is yet to be decided. And this lizard-looking thing came up to me and started talking to me and told me to follow it. Curse God, curse me, follow me. I offer you half the kingdoms, follow me. So I had no choice, so I followed it, and he stuck his hand in the horizon and ripped it open and stepped out of this cell. The Bible talks about there's chambers of death, cells. Isaiah 24 talks about hell being like a dungeon with cells. Ezekiel chapter 32 talks about hell, the pit of hell, being round about with cells embedded in the wall. There are different degrees and levels of torment in hell. I'll explain that in a minute. So I stepped up out of this cube or this cell, turned around. I was amazed at how small it was inside. But when I was inside, it looked large. And that's when this thing told me something. When I wrote the book, the editors told me to take out all the cuss words. This thing, then I got criticized. Oh, you make them sound like pirates. No, I had to make them a rhyming sound. I had to take the cuss words out because they speak in a rhyming, like a snake ready to strike you. And then people were in their places, and some of them would arrive there, and they'd be meeting with dead relatives, or they think they're in paradise. There's always a sense of where they see first, but then all of a sudden they think they're in paradise. And I just make a long story short. I went to I kept looking inside the cells and seeing people, and it was like a download in your mind. You get a life history of the person. And I came to, in the book I wrote about her, and I didn't realize why I wrote about her until years later. And Dear Pudding, she was killed in a car wreck. And so I saw her come down, drop down in front of her, like a tornado vortex, like I was in, dropped her down in front of a thing. But I knew what she saw. She thought she was in paradise at first, and she saw her farm, and she knocked on the door, and the door opened. That was her cell. She saw her grandmother and relatives, and she entered in there. And so this creature, when I walked up there, and he was very animate. They're very fast, and he's rubbing his little hands and stuff. And I'll talk about them in a minute. And she's gleeful watching this. I'm watching this, and she thought that she said the same thing to me that I heard. They said to me, "Welcome to paradise. I mean, you feel the love here." "Oh, grandmother, yes, I do. This is wonderful. Oh, you got an eternity here. It's so lovely. It's so lovely. Let's go outside." She didn't realize she was in a small cell, but the floor would move, and she would think like she was. This is so hard to explain. Inside this little cell, and she's walking, and she gets outside. And her grandmother says, "I'm going to bake you your cookies, and then you go to your favorite spot." And so you're walking to her favorite spot, which was in reality miles away. When she was a little girl, she would go there. It was just right there. And that she started getting some doubts and hear something. And then she sat down on a rock, stuck her hand in a stream. There's no water in hell. She pulled her hand up, and there was sand in it. I've seen that several times. There's no water there, but it was like a mirage. And all of a sudden, the rock wasn't a rock, and the trees were two trees around her were not trees. They were creatures like with tentacles, and they surrounded her, and she shrieked when she realized, who she was and what she did. Most people would think this lady, I had a download on her, so I just take a real brief descript on her. She was somebody who, would be an outstanding citizen of the upper class. And she was head of the PTA. She made the best cookies, I guess she got from her grandmother's recipes. I don't know. And she's always in community affairs. Everybody on the outside loved her, but her family knew her differently. She would go to her son or her daughter, "You will not be a fireman, you will not be a spaceman, you will not be, you only have doctors, lawyers, and dentists in this family." And she would beat the kids with a hairbrush until they complied. She was very mean, actually. She was vicious. And she saw herself at that moment. She realized when these creatures surrounded her, and so when she shrieked, "I'm not in paradise."